The defense fights to reopen evidence in the Fani Willis case. The disqualification hearing is currently pending, waiting a ruling from Judge Scott McAfee, unless he decides we want to hear more about this. Of course, we know we've got a prosecutor who is a current prosecutor in one county over who says she heard Terrence Bradley on the phone with Fani and heard Fani tell him that they're coming after us, and you don't have to say anything. A prosecutor said that. We also had a law professor who confirmed that Terrence Bradley told him the relationship started between Nathan and Wade and Fani back at a judicial conference in 2019. We got cell phone evidence and more that we're all trying to see what's inside and unpack all of this. And Fani herself has said, hey, maybe we should reopen evidence because they found that wine guy back from Napa Valley who said that Fani paid in $400 in cash or whatever. So then let's reopen it. Let's do it. Let's get into business. David Shafer, a co-defendant, is now submitting through his attorney a request to reopen the evidence. State of Georgia versus David James Shafer, and he is on the X platform. You look him up, you can follow him. He is crowdfunding and crowdsourcing his defense. Would be a great thing to do. Filed in the Superior Court of Fulton County. He tells us in reply in support of reopening the evidence, and he wants to oppose Fani's opposition to strike the proposed testimony. Here's what he tells us. All right, Your Honor, Judge McAfee. Our client, defendant David Shafer, respectfully files this reply in support of reopening the evidence and in opposition to Fani's motion to strike proposed testimony. We're also replying to and opposing the state's response in opposition to reopening evidence and a motion to strike the proposed testimony. So Fani does not want Cindy Yeager, the prosecutor, or Manny Aurora, the law professor, do not want their evidence to come in. They say the prosecution, Fani, objects to the defense's request to reopen the evidence as it relates to the defendant's motion to disqualify Fani and Nathan Wade. They do not want us to reopen this to present the evidence of the prosecutor, who happens to be the co-deputy chief assistant DA with the Cobb County DA's office, a co-deputy chief assistant. These names are just amazing, aren't they? Like, what is that? Like, are you the chief assistant? Chief assistant sounds pretty cool, but you're only the chief assistant. You're the assistant, then you're the chief assistant, then you're the deputy chief assistant, but you're not that great, so like you're like a co-deputy. It sounds like a powerful title, a powerful position, but who the heck knows? Co-deputy chief assistant, DA, with Cobb County, and attorney Manny Aurora, counsel for the defendant Kenneth Chesebro, also with him. Now, the irony, they say, of the staff of one DA's office, in this case Fani's, objecting to a member of another DA's office who's prepared to come forward and testify about the disqualification of the other DA should not be lost on this court, okay? It's a wild situation. One prosecutor from one county over is saying, I'm willing to come in and testify about the bad acts of another prosecutor. And the other prosecutor is objecting to the first prosecutor coming to testify about their bad acts. Bizarro world there in Georgia. Now, the state's opposition to the testimony of Miss Yeager and Mr. Aurora is particularly perplexing in light of the fact that the prosecution itself had requested that this court accept an affidavit, one that was not sworn under penalty of perjury, from this guy, Mr. Herbert Brody, the wine guy, the wine salesperson, they say. Or in the event that the court declined to adopt Mr. Brody's affidavit, they requested that Mr. Brody come in here and testify. Now, in making its request to present the testimony of Mr. Brody, the prosecution cited no alleged standards relating to the finality or failure to present evidence in a timely manner. Like, they didn't explain why they should be allowed to just introduce new evidence. But here's what they say. Well, here's the law that we'll reference if they're not going to reference it. Georgia law says the object of all legal investigation is the discovery of truth. It is the high goal that must govern and color all evidentiary and procedural rulings by a trial court. The court possesses the authority to schedule, as it deems appropriate, pre-trial conferences to hear motions, demurs, and pleas. And moreover, this court, it controls the presentation of evidence for purposes of ascertaining the truth. In this case, we, the defendants, writes the defense, have presented evidence to support a finding that the DA, Fani, and Wade, they possess conflicts of interest, that they have knowingly engaged in a pattern of forensic misconduct and have engaged in misconduct in relation to this case. The DA's conduct has created a clear appearance of impropriety, which should not be permitted to undermine public trust in the impartiality of these proceedings and the administration of justice. In the interest, writes Shafer, of the ascertainment of the truth relating to the serious issues before us about prosecutorial misconduct raised by us, the defense, the court should decline to strike the proposed testimony of Deputy Chief Assistant DA Yeager and Mr. Aurora and should reopen the evidence to hear and consider consider their testimony. Respectfully submitted by Craig Gillen, Holly Pearson, 2 attorneys in a very short filing saying, reopen the evidence. The law tells us that we need to get to the bottom of this. It's about ascertaining the truth. Fani introduced new evidence. She brought in the wine guide. That's great. We have a prosecutor. We want to bring her in. We also have a law professor and apparently another attorney, Attorney Manny Aurora, who is a counsel for Kenneth Chesebro. Sounds like he's also a law professor. So he would also testify about this. And obviously Fani is not wanting any of that to come out. So we have a lot of activity here, but we're still waiting really for the judge to issue a ruling. And we have 1 week left to go on that. So 1 week from today, he said, would be when we should get a hearing within this time period. So any minute it should be dropping. Now, Alina Habba, one of Trump's attorneys, was talking about the Georgia case. And here is what she said after a big victory on Super Tuesday. She was celebrating, happy with the results, and then asked about what's going on in Trump's other cases. And here is what she said.
Amazing last night, Martha. He is really focused, and you can just tell that he's ready to get back to business. And the energy in the room said it all. No matter what they do, no matter all the garbage they try and throw at him, he is determined and undeterred, and he will continue to fight for the country so that we stop all of this madness that we're seeing with the legal lawfare, frankly.
Well, he's an incredibly resilient politician and figure of our times. He certainly has had every piece of the book thrown at him, and he still wants to be president of the United States. That's very clear. It's going to be fascinating to watch his campaign over the next 9 months as all of this unfolds. What did you make of this back and forth today as this Republican committee in Georgia listened to the evidence that will be ultimately decided by the judge, as I understand it, in terms of whether or not Fani Willis and Nathan Wade and the team will be thrown off of this Georgia election case? Alina?
I tend to agree with the clip that you played before. I think the judge obviously has a determination to make. I think that the evidence has spoken pretty clearly. There's obviously some inconsistencies that we've seen with testimony that have to be handled. But there's many levels of issues there, right? I mean, let's not talk about whether it's going to be in Congress, whether it's going to be in a court, but there's also ethical issues that will be addressed. I'm happy to say that I'm not involved with the mess that has been Georgia, but I will tell you this, she's made quite a mess for herself. I think that it'll be handled ethically. I think it'll be handled hopefully by the court, but there is no business bringing in people to prosecute and persecute somebody who's a political figure, and to do so in such a manner with taxpayer dollars in any state is problematic. It really is, and it's disturbing, but that's the state of our country right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, once again, just watching the back and forth here. They put up that text message. Ashley Merchant had been in touch with Nathan Wade as she was preparing for this case. She said, do you think it started, meaning the relationship, before she hired him, which is obviously key. Terrence Bradley, who worked on Nathan Wade's divorce, said absolutely. It started when she left the DA's office.
That was before
and
he
was a judge in South Fulton.
Everything was speculative after that point.
Then they went back around on this about how many times he visited her condo during the time period when they say they had no romantic relationship. And watch this.
When I say frequent, do you think prior to November 1st of 2021, you were at the condo more than 10 times?
No, sir.
So it'd be less than 10 times?
Yes, sir.
Wrong. Cell phone records say differently. Not true.
So it's pinging from his house all the way down to the condo at midnight, 1 a.m. And he calls her when he gets there. And then it goes silent for 4 or 5 hours. And then, early in the morning hours, he starts pinging again, driving back, and then he texts her when he gets home.
Hey, baby,
so
this is before he gets hired in November of 21.
Yes.
Wow. She's very diligent with the details on all of this. Do you think this is going to be persuasive to the judge in Georgia, Alina?
I hope so. I think that the judge has a tough determination to make. I think, honestly, never mind any of it, the perjury issue is something that always concerns me with her. If that is the case, that's a concern. There's been too much inconsistencies. If they have forensic evidence that's clear, they can't deny that, right? No. Facts are facts. I know he made a comment about referring them to ethics. I think that should happen no matter what. You can't play with taxpayer dollars while trying to go after a former president. And that's the bottom line. And you also can't lie under oath, which is clearly what happened.
Yes. Shout out, Alina. Yes, you cannot lie under oath. That's perjury. And they're charging Trump and all these co-defendants with various, fraud, forgery, conspiracy charges. Fani has done all of the things that they allege the Trump people did, but she actually did them. She actually was a liar and dishonest in covering up her affairs. She was dishonest on her gift form. Nathan Wade was dishonest on his interrogatories. They all knew he was legally married. They covered this up. She came in there barging into the divorce proceedings, threatening the other side with potential prosecution for interfering with her case, and so on. So all of it political attacks. Alina Habba's right. Going to be a long game. They're going to be in it for the win. And of course, we're going to be here to continue to cover it, my friends. And thank you for joining us as we do. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking this video, inviting a friend or family member to come over here and join us as we continue to cover this case and all of the rest of them as we enter into 2024. We'll love to have you here, and we will see you back here on the next one.